I rise to lead the debate and have read for the second time in this honorable House the bill shortly entitled the Caribbean Community and Africa Export-Import Bank Agreement for the Establishment of a Partnership, Bill 2023. Madam Speaker, let me join in welcoming persons from the deaf community. From what I understand, I think this is the first time that this Parliament would be having such a program to ensure that those who are members of the hearing impaired deaf community would have the opportunity to also hear, in inverted commas, the Parliament. And so I want to welcome them. It really speaks to our agenda to be inclusive of all. Just about 2 weeks ago or so, I might have met with them, and I promised them that the National Assembly will make provision. And Madam Speaker, I'm happy that you saw it fit to ensure that they can indeed hear Parliament, or participate in Parliament, rather, for the first time here in St. Kitts and Nevis. So I want to welcome all of you. And they were teaching me a little bit of sign language. They taught me how to say good morning, Madam Speaker. So I'll try. I hope I get it right. They told me I should do this. Thank you very much. That's good morning. The purpose of the bill, Madam Speaker, and this is a very important bill, is to bring into force the law, the treaty agreement signed on 1st September 2022 at the First Africa-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum. And this was held in Bridgetown, Barbados, between the Africa Export-Import Bank, that we call the Afrixim Bank, and the governments of Barbados, Dominica, Grenada, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Suriname, and St. Kitts and Nevis. That was the first trip that I made as Prime Minister, and that I think was the first signing that I did also as Prime Minister with an international entity. Madam Speaker, what is the Afrixim Bank? The African Export-Import Bank is a pan-African multilateral financial institution mandated to finance and promote intra- and extra-African trade. The Afrixim Bank deploys innovative structures to deliver financing solutions that support the transformation of the structure of Africa's trade, accelerating industrialization and intra-regional trade, thereby boosting economic expansion in Africa. A stalwart supporter of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, Afrixim Bank has launched a Pan-African Payment and Settlement System called PAPS that was adopted by the African Union as the payment and settlement platform to underpin the implementation of the AFCFTA. Let me say, Madam Speaker, with respect to that we in the diaspora, we are considered the sixth region of the African Union. And of course, Africa is on the rise and sees the Caribbean and those of us in the diaspora as part of that greater African nation. And so the Afrixim Bank, of course, understand the ethos of that type of history that we would have had, and is, of course, participating to make sure that what comes forth is a good relationship between Africa as a continent and we here in the West as in the diaspora. The Afrixim Bank is working with the AAU, the African Union, and the AFCFTA Secretariat to develop an adjustment facility to support countries in effectively participating in the AFCFTA. At the end of 2021, Madam Speaker, the bank's total asset and guarantees stood at about US $25 billion. That is nothing to sneeze at. And its shareholder funds amounted to US $4 billion. The Afrixim Bank disbursed more than US $51 billion between 2016 and 2021. The bank has ratings assigned by the GCR International Scale A, Moody's Baa1, Japan Credit Rating Agency GCR A-, and Fitch BBB. The bank is headquartered in Cairo, Egypt. What does this say? This is a reputable bank. This bank has been adjudged by those institutions we consider to be the institutions who are most apt to properly judge banks, evaluate banks, and so forth, and have given this bank very high ratings, which means that this bank is legitimate, and doing business with them will be seen in good order. Madam Speaker, on the 26th December 2022, the Board of Directors of the African Bank approved US $1.5 billion. That's about 4 billion EC dollars. They approved that funding to enable member states of the Caribbean community, CARICOM, that have ratified the partnership agreement with the African Bank to tap into the bank's various financial instruments. Madam Speaker, I'm speaking about here of US $1.5 billion that they are seeking to invest here in the Caribbean. And that's a lot of money, Madam Speaker. So upon accession to the agreement, CARICOM member countries become participating states in the African Bank, conferring on the bank the same privileges and immunities that it enjoys in African participating states that acceded to its establishment agreement. It unlocks the commencement of the African Bank's operations in the Caribbean, Madam Speaker. And this is a CARICOM-led effort. Just recently, we were in Bahamas, and the African Bank did make a presentation to the CARICOM at that particular point. The partnership agreement between the African Bank and the constituent countries of the CARICOM consolidates the bank's efforts to promote and develop South-South trade, and specifically trade between Africa and the Caribbean in line with its diaspora strategy. The African Bank defines intra-African trade as the flow of goods and services between or among African countries, as well as the flow of goods and services between Africa and Africans in the diaspora, Madam Speaker. So the US $1.5 billion financing approved by the Board of Directors of the African Bank enables CARICOM countries to access their bank's financing instruments through financing facilities that support various identified economic sectors, including tourism, healthcare, renewable energy, shipping, mining, agriculture, agribusiness, air links, and aquaculture. The African Bank will also work to support local financial institutions to source finances for SMEs. These key sectors were identified following several African Bank-led business development and trade and investment promotion missions to the Caribbean, Madam Speaker. And I would like to say, Madam Speaker, with respect to that the African Bank visited us here in St. Kitts and Nevis on two occasions. First, they sent an envoy to visit the Caribbean, and of course they came to St. Kitts and Nevis, and we had discussions with them. But later to that, we had the very President Rama, who came to St. Kitts and Nevis. After he left Bahamas, the first country that he visited was St. Kitts and Nevis, where he was able to have discussions with us and meet with us in cabinet as well. This is to show our serious effort to ensure that we participate in this agreement between the African Bank and CARICOM so that we can unlock the financial benefits that we can have. But apart from that, Madam Speaker, the other thing is that we are also looking at making sure that we establish good relations between the CARICOM, St. Kitts and Nevis specifically, and the African Bank. What that does is that it gives us the opportunity to finally seek to, in tangible ways, unite the African continent with the diaspora where we all live, Madam Speaker. And on the 14th November 2022, the Cabinet welcomed members of the African Bank on their first official visit to St. Kitts and Nevis. The African Bank team presented several proposed interventions and partnership in the following areas, Madam Speaker. One, solar power plants. We discussed renewable energy. As you know, renewable energy is part of establishing a sustainable island state. And while we are looking at geothermal, where we have made significant steps, a federal government with the Nevis Island Administration, we are looking at other opportunities to build out our energy sector. And of course, solar power plants would be being considered to be a significant part of that. And so we have signed an MOU with Elsewedy. Elsewedy is a company that participates in producing and also supplying and also managing solar energy. And so that MOU, which we signed in Bahamas, was the first MOU signed between any country and the Afrexim Bank. So we were first, Madam Speaker, in making sure that we turn these great discussions that we would have had with the Afrexim Bank into tangible benefits. And so we will continue our discussion with Elsewedy to make sure that we can benefit from this. Madam Speaker, I would also like to say that we had the opportunity to sign a MOU with Evergreen, and that is a company, of course, supported by the Afrexim Bank that deals with the aquaculture, where we can see how we can benefit by developing and advancing our blue economy here in St. Kitts and Nevis. Madam Speaker, some might ask, is this a competition with local banks? And as was said at the CARICOM meeting, this is not a competition with any other banks. Of course, in a region where we are seeking to develop and advance, we have to seek where we can get other agreements to bring more resources into the region. And so I wish to make it clear that the Afrexim Bank has no intention to operate as a local financial institution, taking deposits and issuing personal loans. It is not here to do that, Madam Speaker. Its purpose is to finance and thereby facilitate trade between the Caribbean and Africa. For example, that we have seen thus far is that this solid bank has brought its existing customer companies to our shores, as explained before, to propose projects by which we can expand their businesses and we can benefit. Those companies will then be able to access the funding from a Afrexim Bank to set up industries here in St. Kitts and Nevis. So what we are saying here, Madam Speaker, is that this will give the opportunity, of course, for financial resources to enter into our country and into our region and give us new opportunities to advance as a country. And therefore, we have made it clear that any such industries, they must use local contractors in the construction phase. And Madam Speaker, I want to make that extremely clear. That is part of our agreement, that we will use our local contractors in the construction phase of these businesses to be established. They must hire local workers at all levels of their businesses, Madam Speaker. Very critical. And provide training and education opportunities for their professional advancement and otherwise bring substantial development to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. Afrexim Bank has maintained that the Caribbean is part of the diaspora of Africa. And in our discussion, Madam Speaker, the bank is of the opinion that they want to finance as much as possible, even up to 100%, to get these companies established, because they recognize the need for us to have more financial resources here in the Caribbean. So the bank is really seeking to reach out to us in the diaspora, not just for financial advancement, but also to reestablish those close bonds between Africa and its sixth region, which is this region in the diaspora. And so, Madam Speaker, when you hear that they would have spoken, and when you look at what President Urama would have said in terms of why he wants to come to the Caribbean, of course you can see that the bank is an extremely large bank compared to our indigenous bank, our banks here in the Caribbean. Of course you see that the bank is well established. Of course you see that the bank has businesses all across the globe. Of course you see how highly ranked the bank is. And so $1.5 billion represents a very small part of the total assets of the bank. But why come to the Caribbean if it's not just about making a dollar? It cannot be just about making a dollar. It had to be that this is underpinned by the very idea, principle, that there must be linkages between Africa and the diaspora. And so this is part of the reason why they want to establish these relationships. Madam Speaker, the bill seeks to give full effect to the agreement for the establishment of a partnership between CARICOM member states and the Afreximbank. Barbados and St. Lucia, they have already taken this step. Even though we have signed the first MOUs, they have taken the steps to bring this agreement to Parliament and have it passed. And that is what we are seeking to do here today, Madam Speaker, in this second reading. However, there is no CARICOM member state more advanced in negotiations for tapping into the US $1.5 billion funding than St. Kitts and Nevis. Talks are advanced, Madam Speaker. MOUs are signed. Technical teams are discussing. The President has visited. Technical teams will visit in short order, especially to look at the energy, solar energy, and also to look at the blue economy development. And so we are moving steadily along, Madam Speaker. On 23rd August 2022, the Attorney General from all OECS member states met to finalize the agreement. So I stress again, this is not just a local thing, a St. Kitts Nevis thing. This is a Caribbean thing, making an important link with Africa. And so they met to finalize the agreement and settled on a final version which was executed on the 1st September 2022 in Barbados. And we participated, obviously, Madam Speaker, to make sure that whatever we bring to the Parliament will be in good order and will comply with what we want as a country and as a nation, and to partner with our CARICOM brothers and sisters, and by extension, the Afreximbank. So the partnership agreement, Madam Speaker, seeks to provide certain benefits which are standard to trade facilitation entities like Afreximbank that do not operate in the local banking market. It also states the various purposes of the partnership. It is important that the people of this federation note them. And I would list a number of them, Madam Speaker. 1, to ensure the attainment of the purpose of this agreement as stated below, participating states and the bank agree to cooperate with, support, and provide assistance for all types and nature to enable the promotion and financing of South-South trade between African countries and member states of the Caribbean community. 3, to promote, to the extent permissible under the establishment agreement, the financing by the bank of exports and imports of non-traditional African goods and services of member states of the Caribbean community in any appropriate form, through extending direct or indirect credit to eligible businesses in participating states. To collaborate, support, and promote the work of the bank in acting as an intermediary between African exporters and importers of the member states of the Caribbean community through the issuance of letters of credit, guarantee, and other trade documents in support of export-import transactions. Madam Speaker, I continue to support the promotion and provision of insurance and guarantee services covering commercial and non-commercial risks associated with African exports and exports of member states of the Caribbean community. I see the leader of government business telling me to slow down, Madam Speaker. But we'll get to it. To provide support to payment arrangements aimed at expanding the international trade of African states and member states of the Caribbean community. To facilitate the carving out of market research and the provision of any auxiliary services aimed at expanding the international trade of African countries and member states of the Caribbean community, and to promote and provide insurance and guarantee services covering commercial and non-commercial risks associated with African exports and exports of member states of the Caribbean community. 8, to facilitate and support the carrying on of banking operations and the borrowing of funds, and to facilitate and support the performance of such acts and do such things as shall be required, desirable, incidental, or conducive to the attainment of the foregoing purpose and functions. Madam Speaker, what we have presented here today, as I seek to conclude now, is that this that we are about to pass here, the agreement between the Afreximbank, CARICOM, and by extension, of course, our federation, that this has the potential really to unlock finances and new areas of development that are so needed here in our federation. We need energy, Madam Speaker. Energy. We are at the point right now where we are being stretched, or we are stretched with respect to, one, the capacity to produce energy, even though we have bought new generators, even though we have fixed one of the generators, we are still stretched, Madam Speaker. In addition to that, we are seeking to establish a sustainable island state. And one of the principles is renewable energy. And one of the MOUs that we have already signed with the African Bank is for the establishment of a possible solar farm. Madam Speaker, this will give us opportunities to unlock other industries, the blue economy, food security, the orange economy. We'd like to see our artists from St. Kitts and Nevis heading over to Africa so that they can perform there, present their art there. Africa has about 1 billion people and it's growing. The economy is moving upwards, which means that there are a lot of opportunities. I want to see our singers move. Why can't we have somebody like Infamous performing in Africa? Why can't we have somebody, tell me what, Minister? Byron Messiah performing in Africa. Conwis Maynard performing in Africa.
I've performed in Africa.
But we want to expand it some more. This is what we're talking about. We now see that the Afrobeat has caught on in the world. And we have had artists who are artists of the Afrobeat here in the Caribbean, and they are well loved and appreciated by our people. But one of the things that was said in the discussion, Madam Speaker, is that you have a continent of 1 billion people. Economies are growing and expanding. We have a genetic connection. We are much closer to Africa than we think. It is closer to go from here to West Africa than to travel to Europe. It's just that we don't have flights from West Africa to the Caribbean. But we did history and we understand the Middle Passage, that to go from the west coast of Africa and you come all the way over here into the Caribbean and you travel this way, you would recognize very quickly that it is not such a far distance after all. So why is it we can't trade between Africa and the Caribbean in a much more aggressive way? Madam Speaker, they spoke about South-South connection. We have similarities even beyond genetics and historical connection and cultural connection. We are in the South. Our economies are what they consider to be developing economies. So it means that we have a lot in common, and together we can help to strengthen each other. And I think that this relationship between the African Bank and the Caribbean community, and St. Kitts by extension, St. Kitts Nevis by extension, is an excellent, excellent opportunity to benefit all of us, all people here in the Caribbean and over there in Africa, of course. One of the things I can remember President Obama said is that he said, we can talk all we want to talk about unification, but if there are not tangible benefits, we will not be able to see that come to fruition. And this agreement gives the opportunity to open the door to those tangible benefits. And as a result, can pull our people much closer together. I remember it even being said that we cross over in ships, not owned by us, actually packed in the bowels of these ships like sardine. But a few hundred years later, we can return on aircrafts, establishing these important relationships that can benefit all of us. So, Madam Speaker, this bill therefore begins a journey of trade partnership with our African brothers and sisters. Imagine being a creative, for example, as was mentioned, in some part in St. Kitts and Nevis, let's say Keys Village. You have a whole market of 1 billion people over in Africa that you can market your stuff to. That is what we are talking about, Madam Speaker. That our people do not have to think of this 68 square miles island here, and you go over to Nevis, together maybe, just over 100 or so. We don't have to think that we're only catering for maybe 50,000 people. But we can actually have the opportunity to market to over 1 billion people, Madam Speaker. So when we speak about this relationship with the African Bank that has establishment throughout the whole of Africa, this can give us the opportunity to access that as well. And so I think that just like the other CARICOM countries who have signed on, and most CARICOM countries, I think, especially in the OECS, I think all OECS countries would have signed on to this. And we are saying that this gives us an excellent opportunity. And so, Madam Speaker, I ask the House to really look at this agreement as an agreement that can unlock financial resources and other opportunities to really help us to advance St. Kitts and Nevis and the region as a whole, and even more importantly, the reconnection between the diaspora and Africa. And so, Madam Speaker, with that, I want to end my presentation on this and to ask the leader of government business, so we're going fast, I think we have a long day, and we want to get through this one, of course. Oh, he said I had to slow down for this sign. Yes. Yes, that is important. And so, Madam Speaker, with that, I want to thank you, and I take you.